I'd like to show you another way you can animate in Max, and that's along a trajectory or path. With path animation, we can constrain our objects along a curve and have them move through time. Right? This is great for animating spaceships, or in our case, our pod racers. So let's go ahead and really bring this pod racer to life. I'll go ahead and move over to the top view and create the path from here. I'll kind of back up the camera a bit, head over to Create, Shapes, and use the Line tool to draw out this path. And let's make this a little interesting. I'll go ahead and have the pod kind of curve to the right and then to the left. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and end the creation of the curve. From there we can head over to the Modify panel, and underneath the line go to the vertex level and start to tweak this just a little bit more. Going to kind of back up the camera a bit just so we have a better looking curve. So I'll go to the Move tool, start to adjust this a little bit more, kind of rotate this out. And what's great is that we can, after the object has been tied to the path, still go back to the vertex sub-object level and tweak this path if we need to. Okay. Then I'd like to just pull out these points just a little bit more. Okay, let's see what this is going to do for us. And again, if we need to, we could always come back and fix our path. Okay, so the next step would be to go ahead and select the object we'd like to constrain to the path. Within our case, it's going to be the main group of the pod. All right, so we'll select the group. We'll head over to Animation, Constraints, and choose Path Constraint. And let's go ahead and now connect it to the path. And there we have it. So what we see here is that our object is now constrained to this path, and it's following the path in time. What we also see is that the range of time at which the object will travel along the path is dependent upon the range of our range slider. So right now our range is set from 1 to 300. Right? And we actually have our first key not on frame 1 but frame 0, which is the first frame in Max. Alright, so if we can go ahead and hold down Alt, Control, and drag with the left mouse button over to our right, can get to frame 0 and see that first key. Notice again that last key is on frame 300. Now if we were to hit play, let's go ahead and check the speed. Oh, that's moving way too slow. Let's go ahead and speed that up. So to get back to the key, we need to go ahead and select the pod. Here's the keyframe. Let's go ahead and drag this to, let's say, 150. All right, let's see if we like the timing here. I'm going to hit play. All right, I'd say that's much better. Now you could also see that this keyframe is red, as opposed to the keyframe we saw before when we keyframed the engine rotation. Being that that was a custom parameter, those keys will show up black. But the red keys represent position keys, and if we see any green keys, those would be our rotation keys, and scale would be blue. Alright, so what this tells us is that the position constraint, or excuse me, the path constraint locks down our ship in its position, but we want this ship to be oriented along the path. So can the path constraint do that? Well, it sure can. Let's go ahead and head over to the motion panel, and underneath our position list, in the motion panel, we can go ahead and scroll down to get to the settings of our path constraint. So if we want this object, our pod racer, to follow the orientation of this path, we simply go ahead and turn on follow. Alright, you can see that it's kind of drifting along the path. It's not actually following the path. So instead what we'd want to do is go ahead and change our axis to, let's say, the y-axis, so it will point forward along this path. Much better. Now if you need to, you could also flip your object on the path. So let's say if our pod racer had some skills, we can go ahead and flip that, hit play, and now it's driving backwards. Okay, but we'll go ahead and correct that. We'll just go ahead and turn off flip. But you can see now we have now constrain the orientation of this object along the path. Now what's great about Max is that even though it's oriented along the path, we still have full control over animating the rotation because only the position is what's really locked down. So what that means is that if we try to move this object along the path, notice it's going to stay locked to that path. But if we go ahead and rotate it, we can rotate this object freely and animate some really fun twisting in this pod. Another way to animate twisting is by just simply turning on the bank control. Alright, so I went ahead and turn on bank. If we hit play, now you'll see that our ship is going to bank along that path. And we have bank settings, we have the bank amount, so we can go to where the pod would kind of bank and start to adjust our values, have it bank a little bit more by setting our bank amount to, let's say, 1. Okay, and then we could also adjust the smoothness if it's a little bit too rough. So I brought the smoothness to about 0.7. We can hit play, and there we go. Beautiful. So again, we can always adjust the curve after the fact. So I think it's a little bit too abrupt. So I'll go ahead and select the curve, head over to modify, go to the vertex subobject, and kind of adjust the path a little bit more, just moving it up in the y-axis. Okay, and I'll do that to the second point. Select from the second point on. Just go ahead and kind of stretch that out just a little bit more. Okay, great. So if we hit play, I think that looks better. And I don't know why we're so far away from our pod racer, so I'll go ahead and select its group and press the Z key to zoom in. Alright, that's better. Okay, so there we have it. We have our ship flying along a path. And again, you could always edit this curve if you need to. Now let me go ahead and show you something else. We can actually edit the timing of our animation and just the effect of the animation from the curve editor. So we'd want to select the object that's tied to the path, right click, head over to the curve editor. So here is our path animation curve. Now again, it's tied to the position list, so that's where we want to look when we go ahead and constrain these objects to paths. So here's the path constraint and here's the percentage. Now notice if we were to select this key and we wanted to tweak its tangent handle, we can't do that, even if we were to set this to auto or custom. The reason why is because of the controller that's tied to this curve. By default, it's going to be a linear float controller. But to correct that, we can go to percentage, right click, and choose assign controller. Notice it's set to linear float. But if we want to go ahead and, let's say, tweak the tangency of the curve, we can go ahead and set this to Bezier float. We choose OK, and now it's going to be smooth. So what's going to happen is it's going to ease out of that first key. It's going to slow in to the animation, and then it's going to ease into that last key, or as it exits, it's going to slow down. So if we were to go ahead and hit play, we can see that. Alright, so notice it accelerates and picks up speed, and then it slows down. And depending on what you're looking for, maybe you'll want it to kind of speed up first and then slow down at the end of the animation. So if we want to do that, we simply go back to the curve editor. We can select this first key and set it to linear. That way it maintains a constant speed at the beginning and then slows down at the end, as if it's flying to its final destination point. Alright, going to our range slider, being that we changed the animation to end at frame 150, we don't need the rest of these frames. So we can hold down Control, hold down Alt, and right mouse button drag to our right to get rid of all of those frames until we land on frame 150. Okay, great. Alright, so we've learned how to work with path animation in Max. We've also learned how to edit that path curve so we can get the speed that we want out of this animation. With that said, that's going to finish this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll go ahead and work with AutoKey to get our pod cab moving along this path.